If I try and fly my freedom with some promise made of gold, that for you my door stays open and our love becomes a simple two-way street. And it's knowing we're not shackled by forgotten words and bonds, and the ink stains that have dried open some lines that keeps you on the back road by the rivers of my memory, that keeps you ever gentle on my mind. It's not clinging to the rocks and ivy planted on some column now that binds us, or something that somebody said because they thought we fit together walking. And it's knowing that the world will not be cursed nor forgiven when I'm drifting through the marketplace and find that you're moving on the back road by the rivers of my memories, and for hours you're just gentle on my mind. Oh, the windmills and the clotheslines and the junkyards and the highways come between us, and some other woman crying to her mother cause she turned and you were gone. I still might walk for hours, tears of joy might stain my face, and the summer sun might burn me till I'm blind. But not to where I cannot see you moving on the back coast by the rivers, ever gentle on my mind. The shutters creak with autumn winds that make me draw inside myself in silence. Cross-legged now I sit and watch the endless chase of leaves across my yard. And laying down my hairbrush, I lean back within my window seat and find that you're moving on the back road by the rivers of my memory, ever smiling, ever gentle on my mind. Ever smiling, ever gentle on my mind.
Yeah. Hello, brothers. We're back with Donna Tartt's The Little Friend. Still in chapter 1, or chapter 2, actually. I think it's The Dead Cat. Yeah. Still in chapter 1, or chapter. Turn off that so you don't echo. And let's get on with it. Oh, let me take off the jacket. Let me take off the jacket, bruv. So we know what we're reading at. Donna Tartt's. Actually, we can put it right up there. The Little Friend by Donna Tartt. After Robin's death, the First Baptist Church started a collection for a gift in his memory. A Japanese quince or perhaps new cushions for the church pews, but more money poured in than anyone had expected. 2 spirit? I'm not even fucking 1 spirit, bruv. I'm half a spirit at best. But more money poured in than anyone had expected. One of the church's 6 stained glass windows, each depicting a scene from the life of Christ, had been shattered by a tree branch during a winter storm and boarded up with plywood ever since. And you're looking for a dude? The pastor, who had despaired over the cost of replacing it, suggested using the money to buy a new one. A considerable portion of the fund had come from the town's school children. They had gone door to door, organized raffles and bake sales. Robin's friend Pemberton Hall, who had played the gingerbread man to Robin's blackbird in the kindergarten play, had given close to $200 to the memorial for his dead friend. Meow! A largesse which 9-year-old Pem claimed to have obtained by smashing his piggy bank, but which he had actually stolen from his grandmother's purse. He had also attempted to contribute his mother's engagement ring, 10 silver teaspoons, and a Masonic tie tack, whose origins no one was able to determine. It was set with diamonds and evidently worth some money. But even without these handsome bequests, the total sum brought in by Robin's classmates amounted to quite a lot, and it was suggested, instead of replacing the broken portrayal of the wedding at Cana with the same scene, that something be done to honor not only Robin, but the children who had worked so hard for him. Hello, Bobs. What's your inner thoughts like? What do you dream about? We need to talk, bruv. I'm reading. Take it to the fat man upstairs. The new window unveiled to the gasps of the First Baptist congregation a year and a half later depicted a pleasant blue-eyed Jesus seated on a boulder beneath an olive tree and involved in conversation with a red-haired boy in a baseball cap who bore an unmistakable resemblance to Robin. Suffer the little children to come unto me, ran this inscription beneath the scene, and engraved on a plaque beneath, in loving memory of Robin Cleve Dufresne. From the school children of Alexandria, Mississippi, for theirs shall be the kingdom of heaven. All right, bros. For all her life, Harriet had seen her brother ablaze in the same constellation as the archangel Gabriel, Saint John the Baptist, Joseph and Mary, and of course, Christ himself. The noonday sun streamed through his exalted form, and the purified outlines of his face, bob nose, elfin smile shone with the same beatific, is that beatific clarity? It was a clarity all the more radiant for being childish, more vulnerable than John the Baptist and others. Yet in his small face, too, was the serene indifference of eternity, like a secret they all shared. No. What exactly happened at Calvary or in the grave? How did flesh ascend from lowliness and sorrow into this kaleidoscope of resurrection? Harriet didn't know, but Robin knew, and the secret glowed in his transfigured face. All right, bros. Christ's own passage aptly was described as a mystery, yet people were queerly uninterested in getting to the bottom of it. What exactly did the Bible mean when it said that Jesus rose from the dead? Had he returned only in spirit, an unsatisfactory spook of some sort? Apparently not, according to the Bible. Doubting Thomas had put a finger in one of the nail holes in his palm. He had been spotted solid enough on the road to Emmaus. How do you say that? Emmaus? He had even eaten a little snack over at one of the disciples' houses. But if he had, in fact, risen from the dead in his earthly body, where was he now? And if he loved everybody as much as he claimed to, why then did anybody ever die at all? Right, bros. When Harriet was about 7 or 8, she had gone to the library in town and asked for some books on magic. But when she got them home, she was enraged to discover that they contained only tricks, balls disappearing from under cups, quarters dropping from people's ears. Opposite the window which depicted Jesus and her brother was the scene of Lazarus raised from the dead. Over and over again, Harriet read the story about Lazarus in the Bible. But it refused to address even the most basic questions. What had Lazarus to say to Jesus and his sisters about his week in the grave? Did he still smell? Was he able to go back and carry on living with his sisters? Or was he frightening to the people around him and perhaps had to go off somewhere and live by himself like Frankenstein's monster? She could not help thinking that if she, Harriet, had been there, she would have had more to say on the subject than St. Luke did. Perhaps it was all a story. Perhaps Jesus himself hadn't risen from the dead, though everyone said he had. But if indeed he had rolled the stone away and stepped living from the grave, why then not her brother, whom she saw every Sunday blazing by his side? This was Harriet's greatest obsession, and the one from which all the others sprang. For what she wanted more than tribulation, more than anything, was to have her brother back. Next to that, she wanted to find out who killed him. Oh no. On a Friday morning in May, 12 years after Robin's murder, Harriet was sitting at Edie's kitchen table reading the journals of Captain Scott's last expedition to the Antarctic. The book was propped open between her elbow and a plate from which she was eating a scrambled egg and some toast. She and Allison often ate their breakfast at Edie's house on school mornings. Ida Rue, who did all the cooking, did not arrive at work until 8 o'clock, and their mother, who seldom ate much of anything anyway, had only a cigarette and occasionally a bottle of Pepsi for breakfast. This was not a school morning, however, but a weekday morning, early in the summer vacation. Edie stood at the stove with a polka dot apron over her dress, scrambling her own egg. She did not care for this business of Harriet reading at the table, but it was easier to just go ahead and let her do it, instead of having to correct her every 5 minutes. The egg was done. She turned off the flame and went to the cupboard to fetch a plate. In doing so, she was forced to step over the prone form of her other granddaughter, who lay stretched out full length on her stomach across the kitchen linoleum, sobbing monotonously. Edie, ignoring the sobs, stepped carefully back over Allison's body and spooned the egg upon a plate. Then she circled to the kitchen table, carefully avoiding Allison as she did so, and sat down across from the oblivious Harriet and began to eat in silence. She was far too old for this sort of thing. She had been up since 5 o'clock, and she had had it up to here with the children. The problem was the children's cat, which lay on a towel in a cardboard box near Allison's head. A week ago, it had begun to refuse its food. Then it had started to cry whenever it was picked up. They had then brought it over to Edie's house for Edie to examine. Edie was good with animals, and she often thought that she would have made an excellent veterinarian or even a doctor if girls had done such thing in her days. She had nursed all sorts of kittens and puppies to health, raised baby birds fallen from the nest, and cleaned the wounds and set the broken bones of all manner of hurt creatures. The children knew this, not only her grandchildren, but all the children in the neighborhood, and brought her to not only their own sick pets, but any pitiful little stray or wild things they happened to find. But fond as she was of animals, Edie was not sentimental about them, nor as she reminded the children was she a miracle worker. After brisk examination of the cat, who indeed appeared listless but had nothing obviously wrong with it, she had stood up and dusted her hands on her skirt while their granddaughters looked hopefully on. "How old is this cat anyway?" she asked them. 16 and a half, said Harriet. Edie bent down to stroke the poor thing, which was leaning against the table leg, with a wild, miserable look in its eyes. She was fond of the cat herself. It had been Robin's kitty. He had found it lying on the hot sidewalk in the summertime, half dead, its eyes hardly open, and had brought it to her gingerly in his cut palms. Edie had had a devil of a time saving it. A knot of maggots had eaten a hole in its side, and she still remembered how meekly and uncomplainingly the little thing had lain while she washed the wound out in a shallow basin of lukewarm water, and how pink the water was when she finished. "Bye. He'll be all right, won't he, Edie?" said Allison, who was even then close to tears. The cat was her best friend. After Robin died, it had taken up with her. It followed her around, brought her little presents it had stolen or killed, dead birds, tasty bits of garbage, once mysteriously an unopened package of oatmeal cookies, and ever since Allison started school, it had scratched on the back door every afternoon at 2:45, asking to be let out so that it could walk down to the corner to meet her. Allison, in turn, lavished more affection on the cat than on any other living creature, including the members of her own family. She talked to it constantly, fed it pinches of chicken and ham from her own plate, and allowed it to sleep with its stomach draped over her throat at night. "Probably he ate something that didn't agree with him," said Harriet. "We'll see," Edie said. But the following day confirmed her suspicion. There was nothing wrong with the cat. It was just old. She offered it tuna fish and milk from an eyedropper, but the cat only closed its eyes and spat out the milk in an ugly froth between its teeth. The morning before, while the children were at school, she had come into the kitchen to find it twitching in a kind of fit, and she had wrapped it in a towel and taken it to the vet. When the girls stopped by her house, Noon, she told them, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do. I took the cat to Dr. Clark this morning. He says we'll have to put him to sleep. Harriet, surprisingly, for she was quite capable of flying off the handle when she felt like it, had taken the news with relative equanimity. Poor old weenie, she had said, kneeling by the cat's box. Poor kitty. And she lay her hand on the cat's heaving flank. She loved the cat nearly as much as Allison did, though it paid little attention to her. But Allison had turned pale. What do you mean, put him to sleep? I mean what I say. You can't do that. I won't let you. There's nothing more we can do for him, said Edie sharply. The vet knows best. I won't let you kill him. What do you want to do? Prolong the poor thing's suffering? Allison, lip trembling, dropped to her knees by the cat's box and burst into hysterical tears. That had been yesterday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Since then, Allison had not moved from the cat's side. She had eaten no supper. She had refused pillow and blanket. She had simply lain all night on the cold floor, wailing and crying. Edie, for about half an hour, had sat in the kitchen with her and attempted to deliver a brisk little talk about how everything in the world died and how Allison must learn to accept this. But Allison had only cried harder, and finally Edie had given it up and gone in her bedroom and shut the door and started an Agatha Christie novel. At last, about midnight, by Edie's bedside clock, the crying had stopped. Now she was at it again. Edie took a sip of her tea. Harriet was deeply absorbed in Captain Scott. Across the table, Allison's breakfast stood untouched. Allison, shoulders shaking, did not respond. Allison, get over here and eat your breakfast. It was the third time she had said it. I'm not hungry, came the muffled reply. Look here, Edie snapped. I've had just about enough. You're too old to be acting this way. I want you to stop wallowing on the floor this instant and get up and eat your breakfast. Come on now. It's getting cold. This rebuke was greeted only by a howl of anguish. Oh, for heaven's sake, said Edie, turning back to her breakfast. Do as you please. I wonder what your teachers at school would say if they could see you rolling on the floor like a big baby. Listen to this, Harriet said suddenly. She began to read from her book in a pedantic voice. Titus Oates is very near the end, one feels. When he or we will do, God only knows. We discussed the matter after breakfast. He is a brave, fine fellow and understands the situation. But, Harriet, we are none of us very interested right now in Captain Scott, said Edie. She felt very nearly at the end of her own rope. All I'm saying is that Scott and his men were brave. They kept their spirits up, even when they were caught in the storm and they knew they were all going to die. She continued, her voice rising. We are very near the end, but have not and will not lose our good cheer. Well, death is certainly a part of life, said Edie resignedly. Scott's men loved their dogs and their ponies, but it got so bad they had to shoot every single one of them. Listen to this, Allison. They had to eat them. She flipped back a few pages and bent her head to the book again. Poor beast. They have done wonderfully well considering the terrible circumstances under which they worked, but yet it is hard to have to kill them so. Make her stop, Allison wailed from the floor, hands clamped over her ears. Shut up, Harriet, Edie said. But, no buts, Allison, she said sharply. Get off the floor. Crying isn't going to help the cat. I'm the only one here who loves Weenie. Nobody else cares. Allison, one day, said Edie, reaching for the butter knife. Your brother brought me a toad he found that had its legs cut off by the lawnmower. The screams from the kitchen floor which greeted this were such that Edie thought her head would split in two, but she kept on buttering her toast, which was by now stone cold, and plowed ahead. Robin wanted me to make it better, but I couldn't. There was nothing I could do for the poor thing but kill it. Robin didn't understand that when creatures are suffering like that, sometimes the kindest thing to do is to put them out of their misery. He cried and cried. There was no way I could make him understand that the toad was better off dead than in such terrible pain. Of course, he was much younger than you are now. This little soliloquy had no effect on its intended subject, but when Edie glanced up, she became aware with some annoyance that Harriet was staring at her with parted lips. How did you kill it, Edie? As mercifully as I could, said Edie crisply. She had chopped its head off with a hoe, and moreover had been careless enough to do it in front of Robin, for which she was sorry, but she had no intention of going into this. Did you step on it? Nobody listens to me, Allison burst out suddenly. Mrs. Fountain poisoned Weenie. I know she did. She said she wanted to kill him. He used to walk over in her yard and get footprints on the windshield of her car. Edie sighed. They had been through this before. I don't like Grace Fountain any more than you do, she said. She's a spiteful old bird, and she's got her nose into everything, but you can't convince me she poisoned that cat. I know she did. I hate her. It does you no good to think like this. She's right, Allison, said Harriet abruptly. I don't think Miss Fountain poisoned Weenie. What do you mean, said Edie, turning to Harriet, suspicious, this unexpected concord of opinion. I mean that if she did, I think I would know about it. And how would you know something like that? Don't worry, Allison. I don't think she poisoned him. But if she did, said Harriet, going back to her book, she'll be sorry. Edie, who had no intention of letting this statement drop, was about to pursue it when Allison burst out again, louder than ever. I don't care who did it, she sobbed. The heels of her hands dug hard in her eyes. Why does Weenie have to die? Why did all those poor people freeze to death? Why is everything always so horrible all the time? Edie said, because that's how the world is. The world makes me sick then. Allison, stop. I won't. I'll never stop thinking it. Well, that's a very sophomoric attitude, said Edie, hating the world. The world doesn't care. I'll hate it for the rest of my life. I'll never stop hating it. Scott and his men were very brave, Allison, said Harriet, even when they were dying. Listen, we are in a desperate state, feet frozen, etc. No fuel and a long way from food, but it would do your heart good to be in our tent, to hear our songs and cheery conversation. Edie stood up. That's it, she said. I'm taking the cat to Dr. Clark's. You girls stay here. Stolidly, she began to gather up the plates, ignoring the renewed shrieks from the floor near her feet. No, Edie, said Harriet, scraping back her chair. She hopped up and ran over to the cardboard box. Poor Weenie, she said, stroking the shivering cat. Poor kitty, please don't take him now, Edie. The old cat's eyes were half shut with pain. Feebly, it thumped its tail on the side of the box. Allison, half choked with sobs, put her arms around it and drew its face close to her cheek. No, Weenie, she hiccuped. No, no, no. Edie came over and with surprising gentleness took the cat from her. As she lifted it gingerly, it gave a delicate and almost human cry. Its grizzled muzzle, drawn in a yellow-toothed rictus, looked like an old man's, patient and worn with suffering. Edie scratched it tenderly behind the ears. Hand me that towel, Harriet said. Allison was trying to say something, but she was crying so hard that she couldn't. Don't, Edie, pleaded Harriet. She, too, had begun to cry. Please, I haven't had a chance to say goodbye. Edie stooped down and got the towel herself, then straightened up again. Say goodbye, then, she said impatiently. The cat's going outside now, and he may be some time. An hour later, her eyes still red, Harriet was on Edie's back porch, scissoring a picture of a balloon from the B volume of the Compton's Encyclopedia. How many more pages do I got here? Not many. After Edie's old blue Oldsmobile had pulled out of the driveway, she too had lain on the floor by the empty box and cried as stormily as her sister. After her tears subsided, she had got up and gone in her grandmother's bedroom, and picking a straight pin from the tomato-shaped pincushion on the bureau, had amused herself for a few minutes by scratching "I hate Edie" in tiny letters on the footboard of Edie's bed. But this proved strangely unsatisfying, and while she was huddled sniffling on the carpet by the footboard, she was struck by a more cheering idea. After she cut the baboon's face from the encyclopedia, she intended to paste it over Edie's face in a portrait in the family album. She had attempted to interest Allison in the project, but Allison, face down by the cat's empty box, refused even to look. The gate to Edie's backyard screeched open, and Helly Hull darted in without closing it behind him. He was 11, a year younger than Harriet, and wore his sandy hair down to his shoulders, in imitation of his older brother Pemberton. Harriet, he called, thumping up the porch steps. Hey, Harriet! But he stopped short when he heard the monotonous sobs from the kitchen. When Harriet glanced up, he saw she'd been crying too. Oh, no, he said, stricken. They're making you go to camp, aren't they? Camp Lake de Selby was Healy's and Harriet's greatest terror. It was a Christian children's camp they had both been forced to attend the summer before. Boys and girls, segregated on opposite sides of the lakes, were compelled to spend 4 hours a day in Bible study and the rest of the time braiding lanyards and acting in sappy, humiliating skits the counselors had written. Over on the boys' side, they insisted on pronouncing Helly's name the wrong way, not Healy, as was correct, but humiliatingly Helly to rhyme with Nellie. Worse, they'd forcibly cut his hair short at assembly, and as entertainment for the other campers. And though Harriet, on her end, had rather enjoyed the Bible classes, mainly because they gave her a captive and easily shocked forum in which to air her unorthodox views of Scripture, she had been wholly as miserable there as Healy. Up at 5 and lights out at 8. No time to herself and no books but the Bible and lots of good old-fashioned discipline. Paddling public ridicule. To enforce these rules, at the end of the 6 weeks, she and Healy and the other First Baptist campers had sat staring listlessly out the windows of the church bus, silent in their green Camp Lake de Selby t-shirts, absolutely shattered. "Tell your mother you'll kill yourself," said Healy breathlessly. A large group of his school friends had been packed off the day before, trudging with resigned slumps toward the bright green school bus, as if it were headed not to summer camp, but straight down into hell. "Oh, look, it's my best friend. I told them I'd kill myself if they made me go back. I said I'd lie down in the road and let a car run over me. That's not the problem," tersely Harriet explained about the cat. "So you're not going to camp?" "Not if I can help it," said Harriet. For weeks she had watched the mail for the registration forms. When they arrived, she tore them up and hid them in the garbage. But the danger was not yet over. Edie, who was the real menace her absent-minded mother hadn't even noticed that the forms were missing, had already bought Harriet a knapsack and a new pair of sneakers, and was asking to see the supplies list. Healy picked up the picture of the baboon and examined it. "What's this for?" "Oh, that," she explained. "Maybe another animal would be better," suggested Healy. He disliked Edie. She was always teasing him about his hair and pretending that she thought he was a girl. "Maybe a hippopotamus or a pig. I think this is pretty good." He leaned over her shoulder, eating boiled peanuts from his pocket, and watched as Harriet glued the snarling baboon face over Edie's, so that it was artfully framed by her own hairdo. Fangs bared, it glared aggressively at the viewer as Harriet's grandfather in profile beamed raptly at his simian bride. Beneath the photograph was written, in Edie's own hand, "Edith and Hayward, Ocean Springs, Mississippi, June 11th, 1935. Together they studied it. "You're right," said Healy. That is pretty good." "Yes, I thought about a hyena, but this is better." They had just put the encyclopedia back on the shelf and replaced the album embossed in gilt with Victorian curlicues when they heard the crunch of Edie's car turning into the gravel drive. The screen door slammed. "Girls," they heard her call. "Business as usual." No answer. "Girls, I decided to be a good sport and bring the cat home so you could give him a funeral. But if one of you doesn't answer me this minute, I'm turning right around and taking him back out to Dr. Clark's." There was a stampede to the front room. All 3 children stood in the doorway staring at her. Edie raised an eyebrow. "Why, who's this little miss?" she said to Healy in mock surprise. She was very fond of him. He reminded her of Robin, except for the horrible long hair, and had no idea that by which she regarded as good-natured teasing, she had incurred his bitter hatred. "Can that be you, Healy? I'm afraid I didn't recognize you beneath your golden tresses." Healy smirked. "We were looking at some pictures of you." Harriet kicked him. "Well, that can't have been very exciting," Edie said. "Girls," she said to her granddaughters, "I thought you'd want to bury the cat in your own yard. So I stopped on the way back and asked Chester to dig a grave." "Where's Weenie?" said Allison. Her voice was hoarse, and she had a crazy look in her eye. "Where is he? Where did you leave him?" "With Chester. He's wrapped up in his towel. I suggest you don't open it, girls." Let's see how much more there is to the next little section. Not very long. We can keep going. Come on, said Healy, bumping Harriet with his shoulder. Let's have a look. He and Harriet were standing in the dark tool shed in Harriet's yard, where Weenie's body lay swaddled in a blue bath towel on Chester's workbench. Alliston, still crying her eyes out, was inside digging through drawers for an old sweater the cat had liked to sleep on and that she wanted to bury with him. Harriet glanced out the tool shed's window, which was furred with dust. At the corner of the bright summer lawn was the silhouette of Chester stepping down hard on the edge of the spade. All right, she said, but quick, before she gets back. Only later did Harriet realize that it was the first time she had ever seen or touched a dead creature. She was not expecting it to be such a shock. The cat's flank was cold and unyielding, hard to the touch, and an ugly thrill ran through her fingertips. Healy leaned in for a closer look. Gross, he said cheerfully. Harriet stroked the orange fur. It was still orange and as soft as ever, despite the frightening woodenness of the body beneath. His paws were stretched out rigid, as if he was bracing himself against being thrown into a tub of water, and his eyes, which even in old age and suffering had been a clear, ringing green, were clotted with a gelatinous film. Healy bent to touch him. Hey, he yelped, and snatched his hand back. Gross. Harriet didn't flinch. Gingerly, she slid her hand to touch the pink spot on the cat's side, where the hair had never quite grown right, the place the maggots had eaten when he was tiny. Weenie in life would never let anybody touch him there. He would hiss and take a swipe at anybody who tried it, even Allison. But the cat was still, his lips drawn back from the clenched needles of his teeth. The skin was puckered, rough like brushed glove skin, and cold, cold, cold. So this was the secret, what Captain Scott and Lazarus and Robin all knew, what even the cat had come to know in its last hour. This was it, the passage to the stained glass window. When Scott's tent was found 8 months later, Bowers and Wilson lay with their sleeping bags closed over their heads, and Scott was in an open bag with his arm thrown over Wilson. That was the Antarctic, and this a breezy, green morning in May, but the form beneath her palm was as hard as ice. She ran a knuckle over Weenie's white stockinged forefoot. It seems a pity, Scott had written with his stiffening hand, as the white closed in softly from the white immensities, and the faint pencil letters grew fainter on the white paper, but I do not think I can write anymore. Bet you won't touch his eyeball, said Healy, inching closer. I dare you. Harriet scarcely heard him. This was what her mother and Edie had seen. Outer dark, the terror you never came back from, words that slid off paper into emptiness. In the cool dim of the shed, Healy drew closer. Are you scared? He whispered. His hand stole to her shoulder. Cut it out, said Harriet, shrugging away. She heard the screen door slam shut, her mother calling after Allison. Quickly, she tossed the towel back over the cat. It would never wholly leave her, the vertigo of this moment. It. Oh, Lord. It. I can't turn the page. Cliffhanger. It would be with her for the rest of her life. And it would always be mingled inextricably with the dim tool shed. Shiny metal saw teeth, the smells of dust and gasoline, and 3 dead Englishmen beneath a cairn of snow, with icicles glittering in their hair. Amnesia, ice flows, violent distances, the body turned to stone, the horror of all bodies. Come on, said Healy with a toss of his head. Let's get out of here. I'm coming, said Harriet. Her heart was pounding, and she felt breathless, not with the breathlessness of fear, but with something very close to rage. Though Mrs. Fountain had not poisoned the cat, she was none the less pleased that it was dead. From the window over her sink, the observation point at which she stood for hours each day, watching the comings and goings of her neighbors, she had spied Chester digging the hole, and now squinting through the kitchen curtain, she saw the 3 children gathered around it. One of them, the little girl Harriet, held a bundle in her arms. The big girl was crying. Mrs. Fountain pulled her pearly-framed reading glasses low on her nose and shouldered a cardigan with jeweled buttons over her house dress. It was a warm day, but she got chilled easily. She needed a wrap when she went out and pegged along out her back door and over to the fence. It was a fast, fresh, airy day. Low clouds raced across the sky. The grass, which needed cutting, it was a tragedy how Charlotte had let the place go, was sprinkled with violets, wild oxalis, dandelions gone to seed, and the wind ripped through it in erratic currents and eddies like wind on the sea. Wisteria tendrils undulated from the screen porch, delicate as seaweed. It hung so thick over the back of the house that you could hardly see the porch anymore. It was pretty enough when the flowers were in bloom, but the rest of the time it was a shaggy mess. And besides, the weight of it was liable to pull the porch down. Wisteria was a parasite. It weakened the structure of a house if you let it crawl all over the place. But some people had to learn everything the hard way. She had expected the children to greet her and stood expectantly by the fence for some moments, but they did not acknowledge her and kept on whatever they were doing. "What are you all children doing over there?" she said sweetly. They looked up, startled as deer. Are you all burying something?" "No," shouted Harriet, the little one, in a tone which Mrs. Fountain did not much like. She was a smart aleck, that one. "Sure looks like it." "Well, we're not. I believe you all are burying that old orange cat." No reply. Mrs. Fountain squinted over the tops of her reading glasses. Yes, the big girl was crying. She was too old for such nonsense. The little one was lowering the swaddled form into the hole. "That's exactly what you all are doing," she crowed. "You can't fool me. The cat was a nuisance. He used to walk over here every day and get his nasty footprints all over the windshield of my car." "Don't pay any attention to her," Harriet said to her sister between her teeth. "Old bitch." Healy had never heard Harriet swear before. A wicked shiver of pleasure fluttered down the back of his neck. "Bitch," he repeated more audibly, the bad word delicious on his tongue. "What's that?" shrilled Mrs. Fountain. "Who said that over there?" "Shut up," Harriet said to Healy. "Which one of you said that? Who's over there with you girls?" Harriet had dropped to her knees and with her bare hands was shoving the pile of dirt back into the hole over the blue towel. "Come on, Healy," she hissed. "Quick, help me." "Who's that over there?" squawked Mrs. Fountain. "You better answer me. I'm going right inside the house and call your mother." "Shit," said Healy, emboldened and flushed with daring. He dropped to his knees beside Harriet and rapidly began to help her push the dirt in. Allison, a fist over her mouth, stood over them with tears streaming down her face. "You children better answer me." "Wait," cried Allison suddenly. "Wait." She turned from the grave and dashed back through the grass towards the house. Harriet and Healy paused, wrists deep in dirt. "What's she doing?" whispered Healy, wiping his brow with the wrist of his muddied hand. "I don't know," said Harriet, baffled. "Is that the little hall boy?" cried Mrs. Fountain. "You come over here. I'm going to call your mother. You come over here right now." "Go on and call, bitch," muttered Healy. "She's not at home." The screen door slammed and Allison ran out stumbling, arm over her face, blinded by tears. "Here," she said, and she fell to her knees beside them and tossed something into the open grave. Healy and Harriet craned to look. It was a picture of Allison, a studio portrait taken at school the autumn before, smiling up at them from the raw dirt. She had on a pink sweater with a lace collar and pink barrettes in her hair. Sobbing, Allison scooped a double handful of earth and threw it in the grave, over her own smiling face. The dirt rattled as it hit the photograph. For a moment, the pink of Allison's sweater was still visible, her timid eyes still peering hopefully through a blear of soil. Another black handful rattled over them, and they were gone. "Come on," she cried impatiently as the two younger children stared down into the hole and then at her bewildered. "Come on, Harriet. Help me." "That's it," shrieked Mrs. Fountain. "Going back in the house. I'm going to go get right on the telephone with your mothers. Look, I'm going back inside now. You children are all going to be mighty sorry." And that's the end of chapter 1. A long-ass chapter. How many pages was that? 58 pages. Hey, everybody like and subscribe. And buy me a cup of coffee on Patreon. So what's that? 58 of what pages? 58 of 500 and some. 560-ish. Ain't much. It's a pretty wonderful book, bruv. Look, there's the horse. It's an horse. Now, who the fuck was this Omar guy? Fuck is Omar? Another 12-year-old? Or pretend 12-year-old? Turn off the flash. The flash is gone. Omar, more about this channel. The Happy Unit. I don't know who the hell it was. Ryan Chu. Puffy Coon. Or is that Kun? Puffy Kun. The little friend. Who the fuck else was here babbling on? Omar. Aniket Singh. Book name, please. We need to talk. I love you, though. Let's tell each other our inner thoughts and deepest secrets. We can whisper sweet nothings into each other's ears. Shh, let me read to you. Do you cry often, sometimes hard? I want to be there for you. I need to be there for you. Jesus Christ. Is this love? Is this love that I'm feeling, Bob Marley? What are we? Like, what should I tell my friends that we are and stuff? Fucking nonsense. Oh. Oh, man. What time is it? 2:27. The dead cat. What's the second part about? The bluebird or something like that? The blackbird. Look at the pitting. The pitting. No, I'm not reading even the jacket. It's best not to know, bruv, what's going to happen, though I can't imagine reading 500 pages, quite frankly. Seems too involved. Well, it's possible. It's possible. Almost looks like it says done, Tartt. Oh, there you can see the A better. Better. Why are you laughing? Don't you have to fire up your truck and head to Alaska now? Hey, I'm going on a long ride. When? 3 weeks. I'm going to Alaska. Via Nebraska. What kind of bullshit is this? Yeah, it's strange that a what? What? Right. Crazy strange. Hey, I drove all over the world, just not in the last fucking 3 weeks. Maybe we can find a face in the cover here. It's weird that 2 or 3 people are here and they just sit in silence. Maybe they want more book. I like Sydney, Nebraska by Wyoming border. The Cabela's has truck parking. It's fucking great fun, buddy. It's the Sydney Sweeney of truck driving. Look at that. Donna Tartt is really popping out here. Donna! Where's that bitch? What do you think? What do you think? Oh man, it ain't easy. It ain't easy being a book pimp. "48 minutes. Damn, got 6 likes on this one. We're really growing here. We're really growing. We're really establishing a movement here. "782 followers, subscribers. Hey, we almost got 2 a day now, buddy. How lucky. Oh fuck. Are you coming back on tonight with a live show for Chuck? Why? You don't have to drive the truck tomorrow. You're on vacation. Permanent vacation. But your sleep schedule was messed up. I thought you were in fucking whatchamacallit too. Out west, shouldn't it be like 11 o'clock? Outside the truck. Outside the truck stop. I go to bed with the chickens. I love the chickens. It is what? It is what it is. Yeah. Hey, I sleep till 6 o'clock in the afternoon now. Right. My sleep schedule's all messed up. I was out clubbing. Now you're in Florida. What the fuck? The fact that there's 4 people just staring at this book cover is kind of shocking to me. Right. Yeah, none of those places are interesting. Hey, I went to Four Corners and stuck my foot in my hand in 4 states at once. Hey, I was in 1,000 states. Yeah, I could imagine. Hey, I'm a video editor. I spend 17 hours to produce a video. And then I put a Patreon link under the bottom. Hey, come and look at me. The worst part is people that fucking put these little cuts and they're like reading, and the next thing you know, they're just like, wow. What the fuck is that? But people must love it. I see some of the dumbest fucking. Hey, I just got back from my Barnes and Noble book haul. I'm like, that's not. That's like going to a fucking stocked fish farm and saying, "Hey, look at this fucking whopper catch I had." No, that ain't shit. Anybody go to fucking Barnes and Noble and buy a bunch of interesting books for $600. I mean, what the fuck is that? It's insane. Hey, look at all these trout I caught. And this little fucking pond where they're just flipping over each other. That's great. That's fucking impressive. I went to Barnes and Noble, and shockingly, I found 17 Charles Bukowski books right next to each other, all $23.99 each. That's quite a haul there, Susan. Hey, maybe I'll drop that black cat off some food at work. Then we can turn him into a work cat. Can't fucking follow. Wouldn't that be terrible if he followed me home? Down the freeway, just running. As my wheel falls off. Wow. Hey, look, the chat shut off. Chat is disconnected. It's that time. It's that fucking time, bruv.